One day, my wife Emily came to me with a question. It started when she noticed something in my eyes when I looked at her mother, Linda. I tried to avoid eye contact when Linda was around, but Emily noticed it twice and decided to argue with me. She asked me directly and I tried to brush it off as nonsense, but she wouldn't give up until she had an answer. Okay, I thought, and decided to just answer her the way I wanted to. Emily looked at me carefully, waved her hand dismissively, and walked off into the other room, closing the door behind her. I was left alone, pondering the situation. What made her suspect something? Nothing had changed in our lives, except for one thing: Linda started visiting us more often. I usually only saw her on big holidays, but lately she'd been coming more often, sitting in the kitchen with Emily, chatting and whispering so I wouldn't hear, and then giggling softly. I'd walk in, and they'd fall silent, as if I had nothing better to do than lurk in my own apartment. Linda was sitting in a short dress, trying to look younger than her years. She was succeeding. Her legs were still in good shape, but I couldn't help but notice the way she was looking at me, as if studying me. I didn't know what she was thinking. Then one day she jabbed her finger at me to get me to come closer. I was stunned. Linda was usually strict with me, never joking. We always talked only about practical things. She was an attractive woman, with many men claiming her attention, but no one would ever know what I thought of her. And yet here she was, calling me closer. I swallowed hard, my t-shirt sticking to me as I took a hesitant step, then another. Her lips opened slightly as I leaned towards her, trembling slightly before I kissed her and stroked her leg. Linda responded, and at that moment I heard the front door slam. Emily had come home. I jumped back, my nerves were on edge, but Emily acted as if nothing had happened. She didn't say a word. Linda was stirring sugar in a cup of tea, calm as ever. I sat in front of the TV for a while and then left the room, feeling the frustration building in me. Before we went to bed, Emily winked at me and asked, "Do you want my mom, Brian?" I wanted to snap back, but held my tongue. After a few days, things seemed to calm down. But then I heard Linda calling my name, and without thinking, I went to her. She looked at me, and I moved closer, starting to undo the buttons of her blouse. She helped me as if this was all perfectly normal. I was nervous Emily could walk in at any moment. But Linda was calm, as if she knew exactly how much time we had. When they finished talking, Linda sat with Emily for a little while longer, sipping coffee, and then left. The day went on as usual. No hints or comments from Emily until bedtime. She came out of the bathroom and asked, "Do you want my mom, Brian?" I blushed, trying to keep my composure. Emily smiled enigmatically, turned her back to me, and fell asleep. A few days later, Linda came in again. I tensed up, but Emily immediately left, saying she had to go to her friend's house right away. I didn't bother to argue. Linda didn't need to call me this time, and I willingly went to her. I was calm, confident. She and Emily were clearly up to something, but I couldn't figure out what. And frankly, I didn't care. I loved it. Linda knew exactly when to call it a day, always just before Emily got back. Whenever Linda came in, Emily would leave, and I would be alone with Linda. I couldn't help but wonder if they were conspiring against me, but it worked. Linda and I grew closer, and my relationship with her improved dramatically. Before all this started, I'd had a girlfriend on the side, nothing serious, just a distraction. But now I didn't need anyone else. I had Emily and I had Linda. Maybe that was their plan, to keep me in suspense. If so, it was working. It might have seemed strange from the outside, but no one had any idea what was going on behind closed doors. And I have to admit, I felt like a winner. I didn't have to splurge on a friend, and my wife had more money in the family budget. Linda never expected gifts or anything like that. It was wonderful, in a perverse sort of way. It went on like this for several weeks, and each time Linda came over, I felt more and more comfortable around her. Our encounters became more and more passionate, and I looked forward to those moments when it was just the two of us. I began to notice little things about her: how she smiled when she was being mischievous, how subtly she touched my arm when no one else was around. There was a kind of high in the mystery of it all, and I began to crave it. Our relationship with Linda grew into something more than I could have ever imagined. We talked for hours, not just about Emily or mundane topics, but about deeper things: our fears, our pasts, our dreams. It was strange, but there was a connection between us that I hadn't felt before. Emily seemed to enjoy this dynamic too. She would wink at me or smile slyly when Linda was around, as if participating in a joke I didn't quite understand. Sometimes I thought she took some pleasure in knowing that her mother and I were involved. It was a strange arrangement, but it seemed to suit us all. One afternoon, while Emily was at work, Linda stopped by. She called me ahead of time and asked if I would be home. I said yes, and when she came over, there was no hesitation. We hugged as soon as she walked through the door. The tension between us was building, and it was getting harder and harder to keep our hands off each other. We moved into the living room, and I felt a rush of excitement at the thought of being caught. There was something interesting about the risk, and it made every touch, every kiss even more exciting. Afterward, we sat on the couch, catching our breath. Linda was looking at me with a tenderness in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. "You know," she said, "I never thought this could happen between us, but I'm glad it did." I nodded, not knowing what to say back. I felt the same way, but some part of me still couldn't believe what was happening. It was all like a dream that I didn't want to wake up from. There was a vulnerability in Linda's voice that made me feel even closer to her. It wasn't just about arousal anymore, it was about companionship, about someone who understood me in a way no one else ever had. Later that night, Emily came home and Linda had already left. Emily seemed to know exactly what had happened. She didn't say anything directly, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. When we sat down to dinner, she leaned over to me and whispered, "Did you have fun tonight, Brian?" Her words sent a shiver down my spine, and I couldn't help but smile. It was obvious that whatever game we were playing, we were all committed to it. I found it hard to believe that Emily was okay with all of this. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that she must have orchestrated the whole thing. The look in her eyes spoke for itself. She enjoyed controlling me, her mother, the whole situation. It added another layer of intensity, another excitement that was impossible to ignore. As the days went by, I reflected on how much things had changed. My relationship with Emily had always been good, but it lacked the excitement I was feeling now with Linda. It wasn't that I loved Emily less, on the contrary. I felt closer to her now than I had in years. It was as if this strange arrangement had brought us closer together in ways neither of us could have anticipated. The tension, the secrecy, the thrills, it was all part of our lives, and I couldn't imagine things going back to the way they'd been. Emily started dropping hints here and there, testing me, pushing my boundaries even further. She started suggesting activities for Linda and me, small ones at first, going grocery shopping, helping her around the house, but soon things escalated. One day she offered to take Linda with her for the weekend. I knew she was testing me, and I was eager to see where this would lead. The weekend trip was spent in tension, excitement, and furtive touching when no one was looking. We all pretended it was a casual family outing, but there was an undeniable electricity felt beneath the surface. Linda and I were constantly looking for moments when Emily was distracted. It was exciting, almost like a game. The thrill of almost getting caught only heightened our passion for each other. I remember one evening during that trip when we stealthily retreated to a far corner of the cabin while Emily was busy talking on the phone. The secrecy of it all, the fact that we had to be so quiet, heightened all the sensations. I could see in Linda's eyes that she was enjoying it as much as I was. At home, things continued as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Linda was still coming over to our house, and Emily was still finding excuses to leave. Emily, for her part, was getting bolder, occasionally teasing me with Linda right in front of her. It was as if she enjoyed seeing me squirm, watching the interplay between desire and restraint. Sometimes she would run her fingers down my back while Linda was in the kitchen and whisper things in my ear that made me shiver with arousal and anxiety. Emily was in control, but it wasn't just about dominance. It was as if she was creating something deeper between all of us, a bond that was stronger, albeit unconventional. She seemed to take genuine pleasure in the fact that we were all complicit in this strange, exciting arrangement. I had moments of doubt when I wondered how long we could continue this, whether it would last, but those doubts were quickly drowned out by the intoxicating reality of our lives. One evening, after Linda had left, Emily sat down next to me, her eyes sparkling with a familiar mischievousness. She leaned toward me and whispered, "Do you think you could be with both of us forever?" It wasn't just a question, it was a challenge. And in that moment I realized that the high wasn't just in the secrecy or the risk of being caught, it was in the bond we'd all formed, this unspoken agreement that brought us closer together, even when it defied all conventional notions of family and relationships. Women are so tricky. Such a plan to eliminate a rival would never have occurred to me. And yet here we were, and everyone seemed happier than before. It was unconventional, but it worked for us. And maybe that was all that mattered. The boundaries of our relationship shifted, expanded into something both exciting and disconcerting. And as I sat there, feeling Emily's warmth beside me, I knew that whatever it was, however long it lasted, I was in complete agreement.